Wonderful. So my name is Alex Winder. I'm a visiting assistant professor and the director of undergraduate studies for Middle East Studies here at Brown. I'm extremely excited to be here and really excited to see so many people here in the audience. I want to thank those who helped organize this event, particularly students organized for Syria, especially Noor, Anchita, and Sami. Middle East Studies, and of course the Watson Center. First and foremost, our speakers this evening, Jose and Omar. I'll speak a little bit about kind of the format of the event and some of the goals that we have for the event before turning the floor over to them. So basically, I'll say a few words. Jose will speak and Omar will speak, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. We're going to have two mics in the aisles, and you can just line up for Q&A. If you can try to keep the lines at 3 people maximum so as to avoid blocking other people's views, that would be wonderful. Then kind of through the Q&A, hopefully have a rich conversation to kind of bring together some of the ideas and thoughts and concepts and experiences that we'll be hearing about this evening. So I'm going to say a few words about kind of the ideas behind. If you're on that, would you have? I can only say that you should politely ask those sitting next to you. I don't know if I have a better solution than that. And hope that they're accommodating enough to let you through. Thank you for that question, though. The logistics are always important, even more so than sometimes the concepts and the ideas. As far as the concepts and ideas behind this event, kind of one of the key goals is to try to bring together 2 conversations that are really important conversations and aren't often put together in the same space. Of course, I'm talking about the conflict in Syria and the phenomenon of mass incarceration in the United States. Of course, one could always find 2 kind of important conversations and put them together, but what does that necessarily kind of add by putting them together? And I think there's quite a bit that we'll see today that's added by putting these together. In part, kind of one of the goals is to think about de-exceptionalizing certain spaces that are often constructed or thought of as exceptional. The term American exceptionalism is one probably many of you have heard. And for those of us who study the Middle East, this question of Orientalism and the kind of ways in which the Middle East is seen as an exceptional kind of space is a different kind of exceptionalism. And so I think by bringing these 2 speakers together and by kind of thinking of these parts of the world in conversation with each other, we can try to work to de-exceptionalize the Middle East and the United States. To the extent that the Middle East and the United States have been kind of brought together in discussions of incarceration or securitization, it's largely taken place in the context of discussing the so-called war on terror, addressing topics like the role of US military and contractors in Afghanistan and Iraq, including locations like Bagram Air Force Base and Abu Ghraib, or kind of the question of the indefinite detention of so-called enemy combatants in Guantanamo Bay or other black sites, or the practices of US allies like Egypt, Israel, or Saudi Arabia, and the practice of extraordinary rendition of suspects to those countries. And all of these topics and conversations, I think, are really important, but they tend to kind of reproduce that kind of American exceptionalism that I mentioned earlier, that sees the US empire as the center of any discussion of securitization, whether in the Middle East or elsewhere in the world. And what happens is local dynamics tend to be overshadowed by great powers, and the experiences of those subjected to these policies and practices are often subsumed into a larger critique of US policy. Now, what's interesting in this case is that the Syrian regime certainly cannot be seen as a mere extension of US empire. So this juxtaposition is in some ways defamiliarizing. It demands a more complex, thoughtful, and nuanced approach to issues of state power, securitization, the production of suspect populations, the logic of incarceration, and of course, the experiences of imprisonment. And certainly Syria and the US aren't the only geographies we could put into conversation, but I do think it's a productive one. And again, not just to kind of bring together different subjects, but also to bring together different audiences. And I think that was also one of the goals of this event. If you organize an event about Syria, you might have a certain kind of a group that would kind of show up to that event. Likewise, if you put together an event around mass incarceration in the US, you might have a particular group that comes to that, and you might not have a lot of overlap. So I think part of what we'd like to see here is also to kind of have this space be one of interaction, not only kind of between speakers and the audience, but also as between the audiences that we have here today. People often talk about silos, kind of whether political, intellectual, social, or institutional, and critique this notion of silos. So I hope that part of what we're doing today is trying to blur and break down some barriers and draw some new and interesting connections. So we're looking to kind of broaden the scope to think beyond and across boundaries. But also, I think this event asks us to narrow the scope a little bit, to take issues that are often spoken of in the abstract or at a kind of national or even regional level and think about them on the individual level. What is the individual experience of these phenomena we talk about? And in settings like these, I think discussions of mass incarceration or discussions of the conflict in Syria or any number of other conversations that we have tend to kind of focus on policy or academic analysis. And it's important to introduce into these spaces the voices of those whose lives have been and will be impacted by the kinds of policy recommendations made by experts coming out of institutions like Brown and elsewhere, and whose experiences continue kind of beyond the academic talk, article, or book. These voices do more than complicate or challenge academic or policy analyses. I think their inclusion has to be seen as part of a broader effort to dismantle some of the inequalities and disparities of knowledge production itself. So thinking about an extractive mode of research where kind of those in academia go to impacted communities, take knowledge, take stories, take experiences, and then kind of don't go back into those communities to offer anything. And to think more about a praxis of exchange where those of us within academia are doing more than kind of taking, but actually kind of opening up spaces for a more equitable kind of exchange of information and knowledge. And with that, I'd like to kind of mention the Brown prison initiatives, which is kind of an important part of Brown that works in that regard. I'll mention the website briefly, www.brown.edu/initiatives/prison-outreach, or you can Google it, which is probably easier. So with that, I'm going to move to introduce our speakers. We're extremely pleased to have two really brilliant and energetic and thoughtful speakers. The first of which is Jose Diaz. Jose Diaz is currently a BA MA track student majoring in Latino Studies and Social and Cultural Analysis at New York University. In his studies, he seeks narratives within which race, class, and gender intersect to consider how these links could provide the nexus for social parity within social movements. He's also a writer and has been working in a writing group called Lives in Transition to highlight personal struggles within a politicized world after incarceration. Jose was incarcerated in 2005 at the age of 19 and served a total of 11 years in prison in a number of facilities in upstate New York. During his incarceration, he was involved in various prison-to-college pipeline initiatives and eventually matriculated into New York University. He is now a student ambassador and liaison for the NYU Prison Exchange Program, advocating for and educating on the importance of inclusivity within the narrative of prison initiative programs and education, and pushing back against language and ideas that perpetuate and reproduce the stigmatization of formerly incarcerated individuals and people of color. Please join me in welcoming Jose.
Hello, everyone. That was quite an intro. Let me just set up real fast. Be on our way. So one of the things that Alex just said right now that kind of like really hit me was like this idea of inclusion and how very much important this is, and how not only inclusion is important, but also what inclusivity brings. It brings a different dimension to what could be learned through the exchange of stories. And on the way here, I was coming here earlier, and on the way here, I had the Uber driver, and it was a white guy, and he was like really bro-ish. And so we just started like, kicking it, just having a conversation, and essentially he was just bad mouthing Brown students. And and he just asked me about my story, and I told him like, yeah, man, I'm actually here to speak at Brown, and I've actually did a lot of time. And he turns to me, he's like, holy shit. Like, it kind of boggled him. But then after he started sharing with me, his brother is actually on trial for the same crime that I did. And this is just a random Uber driver. Me just having a random conversation, just being completely honest with who I am and owning up to that. And it gives room for what I believe was a healing moment, because I gave him some advice to give his brother, which is, take the time. You go to trial, you did it, they're going to give you a lot of time. And that's just the reality that that individual is dealing with at that time. And only a person who has been through that scenario or that lived experience will know what I mean, know what that feels like, and knows that essentially if I didn't take the time they were giving me, I will probably have another 15 years to possibly the end of my life in prison. And so it's like what Alex was just saying, like the idea of knowledge production, what is being produced and what is being extracted. And when I was first released from prison back in 2016, it was around the time where Trump was going to be elected. And, I live in the neighborhood where Michael Garner was killed at Stapleton, Staten Island, New York. And, I started hitting the streets and I started talking to a lot of people. I wanted to like get people not necessarily riled up, but on the same page where we had where did we have our rights politically, and how could basically we put that in the right place during this current election? How could we basically put pressure on our local politicians? And I went to the housing projects. Just about in every housing project, there's a youth center or some type of organization that it's basically employed through the New York City Housing Authority that allows people to congregate. They have some type of initiative there for people to get ahead or just congregate, communal things. And so I spoke to the people there who were running the program, and I told them what I wanted to do, and they said, that's fine, that's beautiful. They asked me, well, what credentials do you have? I had none. The only thing I had was that I was a concerned citizen, but that wasn't enough to hold any type of meeting that would give me space there. So that kind of like led me to the place where I am now. It's like as a BA track student, someone who's also applying to doctoral programs, and hopefully I will be able to get those credentials and be able to move forward then. But one of the things that kind of struck me, that we all went out to dinner the other day last night, and we began to like share like our lives and our experiences and how we all felt about incarceration. And one of the things that like we had touched on eventually was like my love of philosophy. And needless to say that when I started to talk about Kierkegaard, they were like, where are you going with this, But I had read the book Fear and Trembling while I was incarcerated. And basically, the book is a philosophy book about religion, and its premise is to question what is the teleological suspension of the ethical. Meaning that when does the ethical disappear? And when that does disappear, what is left there? And, for me, it's like I had thought about that question, and I wonder, well, what is there? When all ethics are gone, what is there? And for me, I found that it was people. And I have come to understand that, within people, there's hope. And within that hope, there is faith. And it's in that faith in each other as people that we find that when ethics aren't there, that's what exists. That hope, that faith, but also a certain level of kindness. For me, within the context of incarceration, where all ethics are suspended, who did I have there? I had the other people I shared my life with, my experiences with. And those kindnesses were conveyed through actions, through the stories that we share. And one of the stories I'm going to share with you guys today is an experience I went through while I was incarcerated. And I wrote this particular story when I was incarcerated. And it's basically about the passing of my sister. And if nobody knows about how you get permission to go to her funeral, it works in two ways. Either before the person passes, you have to go to a chaplain, you have to ask someone, get permission so you could go visit a loved one by their deathbed. Or after they die, you could request to go to the funeral, and after a long process, you either get approved or you don't. A lot of people don't get approved, unfortunately. When you do go, there's like this idea where, depending on what officers escort you there, that they'll either like let you buy Burger King or McDonald's or something like that, and you have like this fantasy that you can eat food outside of the slop that they feed you in prison. In my case, this didn't happen. They didn't even basically take off the shackles so I could hug my mother, and they would just like walked over me the whole time. And the only thing I was given to eat was a bologna sandwich. So when the myth is encountered with reality, you get a different experience and a different story. And so here's my story. It's titled Doors. There was a time I thought I was the luckiest boy in the world when I saw my sister come in the house with a White Castle bag. She would hold the bag in front of me, out of my arm's reach, teasingly. I could already taste the warm burgers and greasy fries that I would later drown in ketchup, but she would not hand the bag over until our deal was brokered. Could she sneak her boyfriend in the house? I loved it when she babysat me because she was the rebellion that rewarded the white lies I told my mother about the boys she wasn't sneaking into the house. She would always introduce me to them as her adopted brother because I was. But I guess she felt the need to honestly explain the reason why I was a few shades too dark to be apparently related. Our parents raised us to respect the house and all the rules that came with it. And on that summer day when my mother came home from work, she asked me if my sister had any friends over. I felt compelled to answer honestly. I told her, no. I was conscribed to my sister's world of tattoos and leather vest secrets. Home is what you make it, and for me, it has always revolved around the opening and closing of a door. Sometimes I question where I got my spunk from. Then my thoughts wander to the slamming of a door. In my house, slamming a door was a great way to end a sentence, or even a better way to segue an admonishment into an ass whipping. But regardless of its ramifications, I believe I've not only adopted my sister's method of segueing, I've mastered it ineffably. I can remember her arguing with my mother about one thing or another, but all I could hear was Godzilla thrashing in the living room, the fire's mantelpiece, cleared of family photos. I looked around the living room, finding my favorite picture of her, and saw that the glass in the picture frame had cracked. She'd had left without kissing me goodbye. Her walking away from the home and family that loved her would become cyclical. There were no doors slamming that day. Lying in my bed one night, I questioned, why couldn't my sisters be like the sisters on TV? Why I couldn't go to her house in the suburbs when I needed to get away? But I ended up knocking on a project door to play with kids who didn't know mommy. But why was it that I felt that this was the safest place in the world when shootouts were far from a sporadic occurrence here? I still wonder about those kids that I used to help with their homework, let them beat me in wrestling matches, admonish when they would come out of their rooms before the weed smoke cleared up, or would smack their hands when they grabbed the joint out of their father's ashtray. I was young, excuse me. I always wonder why my sister wasn't doing the right thing when she knew better, was taught better. I was young then, and even though I wanted to make a change, I wasn't physically able to exert my will over their father. And once I stepped out of those project doors, that world was behind me, but also in front of me. Then there was a day that my sister's endless cycle culminated into me pushing her wheelchair out of Orlando International Airport. I can remember exactly what she was wearing as my uncle wheeled her out of the terminal, no more than 80 pounds. Ambivalence raged within me, weighing my heart when I saw her. She looked like the crypt keeper from the Tales from the Crypt, but her eyes still twinkled our secret conscription. She smiled, then cried, and I couldn't resist hugging her skeletal frame and kissing her balding head. I was still her JoJo. The streets were tearing her apart while HIV decimated her immune system. Months later, when she regained her health, it was like her world of tattoos and leather vests were beckoning, and she walked out of the house door. I was no longer conscripted, but months later, I closed the same door behind me. It's like I followed in her footsteps because I found myself walking through my friend's project door. I was living with her kids, and their hearts were colorblind to our racial difference. Love has that effect. But all I could see was my niece and nephews in their black faces. I always kept an appraising eye on the youngest one because he was asthmatic. And his lungs won the consular salt from the Newport between his mother's lips. But I believe it was the crack that she rolled then frizzled that was truly taking its toll on him. No matter how much perfume she sprayed, the scent of jasmine can never mask the monster that embedded itself in the apartment. I remember my heart being rented when he asked me if I was coming back when he saw me leaving with my suitcase. I was compelled to answer as honestly I did my mother. Yes, I told him. One night, I remember thinking about a conversation we had, me and my sister. I couldn't say it clearer than I love you when I spoke to her on the phone in a prison booth. She had walked through our house doors once again, her fiance in tow. She asked me why I couldn't come home now, but all I could reply was, 2 more years. I guess she never grasped the concept of a prison sentence or how violent offenders aren't given anything except time, although most violent crimes could be linked to drugs in the neighborhood. My sister's body was frittering away through drug use, and I was involved in an altercation with men who wouldn't have been on the streets, myself included, if it wasn't for drugs. But I guess the system needs to rotate its doors in a way that what is apparent isn't a nexus. Only a drug dealer willing a Lexus or a fiend itching for the next fix. My sister never had it all. Her mind, daffy since birth, will never understand the concepts of time and prison. I'll wait for you to come home to get married, she told me. I want you to walk me down the aisle, not daddy. The church doors were waiting for me. On that same night, I thought about another conversation we had. I wish I never raised my voice at her while she lay in a hospital bed, or dangled the idea of the prospect of returning it home in front of her like she dangled the White Castle bag in front of me. I needed her to conscribe to my cause, her health, and my hope. But all she wanted to do was to come home. I still feel that way now as tears come down my cheeks because I never got the chance to tell her that I was sorry before her last breath. Or the tears that I never shed at her funeral because I felt dehumanized by the officers. I had shed them. But when I talked to my mother about our conversation, all she could relate that my sister felt alive because she talked to me. I could still feel all her kisses and caresses and remember how I used to wipe my face after, or how I squirmed and ran from her when all she wanted to do was give me love. I wish I could hide behind a bottle and create a filter between myself and my memories, but I can't. And then I wonder, why did it take over a year for me to pen this story? And now I remember my mission and the reason why I will not be going back to a suburb in Orlando when my time is up. I have to walk through those project doors to remind those kids that their mother still lives through the opening and closing of a door. Thank you. I wrote that story a few years ago, and honestly speaking, like my parents are watching now, and this is the first time they're actually hearing the story, or even knowing how I felt. And I think the whole point of sharing the story and thinking about the whole point of inclusivity and why we creating this juxtaposition between Omar and I. And I think the whole idea is to create this humanity that's supposed to be there. That we're here not as tokens to share a story, as compared to like be people who want to include you in, not as allies or create people who are in solidarity with us, but as accomplices in the struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Omar al-Shugri. Is a business analyst for the Boston Consulting Group and an international speaker based in Sweden. He moved to Sweden 3 years ago from Syria, in part to escape the ongoing conflict there. He's from the town of al-Bayda in Syria, near the city of Benias in the Tartus Governorate. For those unfamiliar with al-Bayda or Benias, they were among the first coastal areas of Syria to demonstrate in 2011 against the government of Bashar al-Assad. If you have heard of them, perhaps it's because of the subsequent massacres committed there by Syrian government forces and allied militias in 2013. Omar was imprisoned in 2012 at the age of 17 and spent 3 years in Syrian prisons, including the notorious Sidnaya prison. When I asked him how I should introduce him, he said that I could introduce him however I wanted, but suggested identifying him as follows. Omar is a survivor. He survived torture and hunger. And I think that's as powerful an introduction as any. So please join me in welcoming Omar.
I grew up in a big family, 4 sisters and 4 brothers. It was an army in the school. No one could say anything to me. My brothers, sisters behind me. It was great. My mother was a sailor. My father was an officer. And here we go. Very hard father. I used to be in the nature. I love the birds. In the last birthday of my best friend Kareem, I saw his father like hugging him and saying, "I love you, son." And I go back in the middle of the night to the nature, thinking about my father. My father loves me, but never said that. I never get a hug from my father. I don't understand why, but it feels bad. It feels horrible. should I hate my father or love him, or I don't understand. 18th of March 2011 was the first demonstration in my city, Banyas. And the first thing I was thinking about was my father. Because I know he don't say I love you because of how they grow up in the army in Syria. You don't have any emotion. You don't say these nice words to anyone. So my revolution started only to have a good father saying, I love you, Omar. It was, for me, it was the biggest revolution. If I can change this situation and listen, like having a father saying, I love you, it's going to be an amazing life. I was so excited about this revolution. I want to change my father. From the first demonstration, the security was on the other side. And I was with 30 demonstrators saying what they were saying. Like, I don't know what the revolution actually means because I was 15 years old and don't understand what like politician means or freedom or like dictator or democracy. Nothing for me. I love nature. So I was with these people saying freedom, freedom, yasqut al-Assad, as they said. And it was an officer in front of this, like, many of soldiers said, load, and you can see the weapon, aim, and my father an officer, so he never shoot me before. So they're not gonna do that. I feel safe. Aim, shoot, and like I don't know what to do, but I saw my friend Kareem dying next to me, the blood everywhere, and other people's dying here to the left, to the right. I don't know the left and the right, and just staying in my place. Can't move. People is like just running, trying to find a place to stay in, and I can't move. Just 15 years old, can't think about like the way to survive. And the police come to me and arrested me and put me in prison. I knew before that, or I have learned that, if you are in prison, you are one of the bad guys. I can't imagine like a prisoner, a good guy. But when they put me in prison and I know that I am a good guy, I knew that, so they are bad, they were torturing us. They just, like, the first time when they like just take out my nails, I start to understand they are not the good guy. There's not the bullet that you can think about in the US saving people or doing something good. Now they are the people who kill us. That's why we need a revolution. My first like goal was to have some good words from my father, but it's not anymore my first goal of this revolution. I want to change this government. They are killing us. They don't want to help us. They transferred me from prison to prison. And they arrested me 7 different times. The first one when I was 15. The last one when I was 17. The last one was 3 years. 3 years in prison, it's a quite long time. It's not like being in Providence or Brown University. Because every minute is 100 years. You can see everything, you can feel everything. How horrible is it? How difficult is it? Like people dying every single hour. You have dead bodies everywhere. You just wait to die. Nothing else. Your best dream, the best dream in prison is to eat and to be full, then die after that, because you don't want to be hungry anymore. After 2 years in branch 215, they moved me, transferred me to Sinai prison. Sinai is quite different from other prisons. Prison of silence. No one talk. You are not allowed to whisper. You can't hear any voice, only the guards shouting and saying some bad words and take out the dead bodies. How many dead bodies do you have today? And the numbers just coming up 7, 10, 11, 10, 100. The only thing we could hear. I never heard my voice inside Naya, never. I was so excited to know if this start to be like, oh, this voice or not. Because I want to be like adult, to be big, because my father like look at us as like small child the whole time. I want to be like free, strong, big man. So I was waiting my voice to be like harder. Our days inside now was difficult. There is no words to explain living inside Naya, but it was difficult. Early in the morning, they come and ask you, how many dead bodies do you have? And the doctor come after that and look at dead bodies and ask us if any one of us is sick. And if you said yes, they kill you directly. The doctor kill you. And if you don't answer, they torture you why you don't answer. There is no solution. There was no solution. If you are silenced, they torture you. If you talk, they kill you. How to survive? There is no way. The only thing we could do in prison, we could whisper when we were sure that the God is like so far from us. Because the prison is very big. The first time I whispered was someone very tired of being silent, so we asked the person next to him, who are you? And in Syria, you introduce yourself by saying, I'm Dr. Noor, or I am Engineer Osama, or like this. So you say your work first, and this person say, I'm the engineer Muhammad Mustafa. And he say, oh, I am the doctor, for example, Noor Hadi, or the other one say, I'm the economic and the lawyer, and it's my turn. I am Omar. I was arrested when I was 17, so I didn't have anything to say. I was Omar, but it was enough. People was so happy to hear my name because I was arrested because of my name. The group who had the power in Syria, what we call Alawis, for 1,300 or 400 years ago, there was a leader who killed a lot of them. His name is Omar. And my name is Omar. Now in 2019. So they arrested me for this way, for this reason. So when we get out for hours of torture for every day, they ask me about my name. And in the beginning, when I first time said Omar, I got like 100 belts extra than other people. The day after, they asked me about my name, tried to say something else. But the God knew me. So it was quite difficult to lie. So I said Omar. Then I started to love my name. I hated this name in the first time, but I started to love it. Because I knew that I was right. And they thought that they are bad guys. And every single extra belt I get today, I'm gonna get rewards for in my afterlife, because I had no idea, no thoughts about getting out or surviving prison. I only had a dream of a good life in prison. You forget because you see around 100, 200, 400 dead people every day. And I was in the room, in the death room. There we write the numbers of dead bodies. And I got this task from the guard to write the numbers. So the most normal thing I could see every day was dead bodies. So I could not think about freedom. And I started to talk with these people around me, to whisper with them. And the doctor was sharing knowledge about how to take care of our wounds. The engineer was talking about how to rebuild this prison to make it as a museum or a good school or a hospital. And the lawyer is talking about how to have a dictator-free prison, because there is always an extra hungry prisoner who want to kill other people to eat their food. And the teacher's talking about how to educate these people around you, and Omar is only listening. I don't have anything to share. Then I want to whisper. So I start talking about birds. I had my own language. So it was the only thing I could talk about, birds. But after 1 year, I had much experience. I remember everything the doctor said and the engineer said and the lawyer said, everything. So I became like a library, and these people around me died. All people around me, they just get new people around me. And the last time was a lot of young people like Omar when they were arrested newly without knowledge. So these young people are sitting around me, and I'm teaching them everything I learned from the doctor. And it was our university. We created a university, what I call University of Whispers. It was great education. The psychologist was talking about how to be happy for hours torture, how to be happy in that time. And I could not understand the beginning. When I start to believe in that, to start to try to count the bells every day, when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bells, when I start to be able to count 500 bells per day, I start to believe that I don't care. I lose the feelings, so I don't get hurt of getting bells anymore, because it's like years. I start to love the bells. Without torture, all prisoners gonna die. The most important thing in prison was torture, because it was the only hours when we got like space to have some movement in our bodies. We got around 40 centimeters square per person. So you sit like this. You don't have a place, and you can't move. You can't do anything. But when they take you to torture you, you go 35 meters, and movement of 35 meters is great. Then they torture you and you move your body. It was very important to have this time, because if you sit down, you are going to die. So I start to understand why torture is very important. We need it. Then after that, it was a Tuesday, and the God came and said, Omar. All people with name Omar was like scared, because they used to say the name only when they want to excuse you. And they said, Omar, come closer to my room. I'll show you. It was had a bit of food. I gave it to my best friend. I want to do something good, because no one gives food to other people, because you're going to die if you don't eat. So I gave this food to my friend. And they took me to another room, an isolation room. I sat there alone. And the guard has a Casio watch, which means you can hear beep, 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 beep every hour. And when the first beep, beep came, the guard come and ask me, how do you want me to kill you? In which way? And you should answer. If you don't answer, you get like 100 belts. So you don't want to be silent. So I answered with whispers. And then the next hour, beep, beep, the guard come, and I start to adapt to this situation, and I should hear, yeah, this guard is talking. This accent is from north of Sweden, in the north of Syria. North of Syria, what is the most famous thing that do? They eat a lot of meat. Okay, so kill me in this way. And the doctor come and ask me, how do you want me to kill you? Like, injection here in my mouth, I'm gonna die in 2 minutes. I try to adapt the situation. It was 48 hours, so 48 PP, 48 answers should be, but it was 68 because some guards don't like the answers they do, so they want to have like harder answers. So I answered them the new answers. After 2 days, they took me to the execution and brought me in the street, and the guards, like many soldiers and officers, I could not see anything. I was in the street, couldn't see anything. They put my head in the streets, and the officers going, and soldiers like just still there behind him. He's going and can hear like the sound when his shoes in the small stones in the streets, like this. And he talked like, I had some bad words with me. Then after that, he said, load, aim, shoot. And I just, and I start to believe I had the feeling that I'm in my gate to my paradise. So I got a good feeling of being there, killing me the last time in this prison. I'm surviving now because I like life in prison is like done. I'm the next life. They killed me. So I would think that I died. I'm in, like it's the next life. I have a good feeling. I'm entering the paradise. Then after like long time, I don't know how much, but I just moved so some light come, and we was under the ground, to never see the sun in 3 years. So when the light come to my eyes, just get pain and like fall down, then wake up again, and it was a tree for the first time, like color. And the first time, and it was a bird, flying like this. It was an amazing feeling. I could not understand what happens. Then after that, I just try. I still think I'm in the paradise because everything is beautiful and there is colors. In prison, no colors. And when I first looked down and could see my body, I knew that I could not be in paradise with this body. So I knew that I am still in the first life. And snipers everywhere gonna kill me. Somehow I ended up in Turkey, still alive. 34 kilos, had TBC, moved to Sweden. Come to Sweden. The last thing I wanna say is the most important and powerful and best experience I had in my life was prison. The best thing I'm gonna go through, nothing else. Because when I was in prison, they killed my father and my brothers. So prison protected me. If I was outside, they're gonna kill me with them. So I survived because I was in prison. And when I came to the borders between Syria and Turkey, the guard stopped me and asked me, what's your name? Omar. They took me, and it's like very like special place between Turkey and Syria, so they start to kill me directly. And I just was coughing with blood because of TBC, the sickness. And the blood color was like like, you think about that. And he said, what's that? And I used to torture us. So I just say to him, it's TBC. It's TBC. You're gonna die with me. Let's go together. I just tried to have some fun and just to make him scary because I know I'm in the last time. Let's do something fun. And he was very scared. I could see his face, like yellow face. What? I'm in Turkey. And they just took him. It took me outside the room and put me in the street. And I continued to Idlib and then Turkey. So if I never been in prison, I would be killed. And if never been in prison, never get TBC. No TBC, I'm gonna be killed in the borders. Then because of TBC, I traveled to other countries to like searching for treatment for medical health. Then I moved to Sweden. And there, because of TBC, I got my best friends in the hospital, in the wait room. I met my first friends. And there, my hospital friend introduced me to the family. And the family said, why you don't move to us? I moved to them, live with a Swedish family, learn Swedish, and learn what fika is. You should know, read about fika. There is some Swedish friend that can introduce fika to you. So this experience is powerful and very important for me. And I hope this experience can mean something for you. We'll have a long discussion after that. So I don't hope that you like the story, but I hope that you understand what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for these intense and powerful stories. We have microphones here. If you have questions, just get behind a microphone and feel free to ask. While we're waiting for people perhaps to absorb what they've heard, I wanted to start out by asking each of you about the process of writing or speaking and how that process is a way, both kind of how you think about it as a way to communicate your experience to others, but also to try to make sense of your own experience, and how kind of perhaps particularly to Jose, but also Omar, the difference between kind of writing a story in prison versus writing a story out of prison. Is there a difference in terms of what it is you're trying to communicate, or how it is you kind of situate yourself as an author or a storyteller?
Oh, this on? You guys can hear me good? Awesome. There was this book I read while I was I read a lot while I was incarcerated. Jesus. It's by Andre Dubious III. It's called The Townie, and he wrote about his process of writing and what he was trying to do with his writing as a person. And to him, it was like a journey of self-discovery. And he had wrote these lines like, when he was writing, he described it that in order to get to the core of himself, he had to like dig through the skin and the muscle and get at who he was himself. And for me, writing was similar to that process, and where I had to dig at what it was for me to write this story. And being out of prison, that was while I was in prison. And, you know, when I wrote the story, I cried like crazy in the cell. And I had a good professor who was always pushing me, well, what does this mean? Bring this out more. And I did. And so there's a certain level of healing that goes on there. And when I'm out, you know, now that I'm out and I've read the story quite a few times at different venues, and also have done some writing, I think it's dealing with the idea that the trauma is over, as if it's not continuous. And I know if I ask Omar, does he still think about it? Of course. Do we carry those things around? Of course. I don't think I'll ever get erased. But yeah, it's definitely has been something that has allowed me to, like, you know, put it out there and kind of like create this moment to heal some of my own wounds.
I actually start writing the story when I was in prison. We had no bed. We was naked in prison, only the ceiling and the ground. But I start writing it in my brain and with some poesy, if we call it poesy in English. Poesy? Poetry. Okay, good to have switch friends. So start writing, but the thing that I was thinking about right now, that all the poetry we wrote in prison in our brains was like love poetry. Because we missed the love there. But it's love poetry ending with explaining. I just can explain the whole Syrian war and torture in prison by talking about a girl. Because it was our way, because you should be careful. Because you don't know who is the person next to you. Could be like a spy. So you should be careful. So we wrote all our like stories, poetry by talking about something different. Then I get out. I love talking. You can see that. I love speaking. So when I moved to Sweden, and it was my best friend Anton, he said to me, Omar, you should tell your story. I told you yesterday. He said you should lecture. I said, no, I don't lecture. You should tell. Yeah, I can tell, but I can't lecture. I'm not a professor. You know, in Syria, you say, like, you lecture for professors, not for us, like, not educated people. So I said, yes, I tell. So I get out, and it was a good audience, maybe 200 or 300 people, and start talking. People was interested, so that motivated me very much. And I had so many, like, psychologists friends who, since in prison, helped me always to talk about this experience, because I knew that if the story stay in my heart, it's gonna destroy my heart. I need to share it with someone else, because people can share it. It's gonna be like easier for me. So I'm talking about this experience every day, and maybe you see that I take the whole story from almost only from positive aspect. I have so much fun with my experience. I think it was great experience, because when you survive, you just get the experience, and how good is it? I don't remember how painful it was. Only remember that I had amazing people around me. I don't know if it's like the same experience for other prisoners or not. But the only thing I can remember when I'm gonna sleep is only the good things. But when I sleep in the dreams, I see the security. But I'm always safe in my dreams, and I know that I'm dreaming, because there is great people I met in prison who always like make me very safe, try to protect me when they torture us, like try to be over me so the belts come in their back, not in mine. So even in my dreams, these people come to me and save me the whole time. So I'm security there in my dreams, but still very happy. I know that I'm gonna survive. I like this feeling when you wake up. Yes, I'm still alive. I'm amazing. You survive every day. It's the last day of prison every day. That's great.
Do you remember any of the love poems?
Of the
You were locked up?
Poems.
Love poems?
poems.
Poetry.
Poetry. Yeah,
You could
absolutely. I actually, absolutely. Absolutely. When I get out of prison, I lost my memories. I could not remember my mother or my father's or anything, but I could remember every like small detail from prison. You never forgot that. everything, like many specific things. I remember how my square was look like, and how the corners and every room and every words I wrote in prison still with me, and I'm happy for that. Do you remember everything? It's like for me, it's only 3 years. You have 11.
Yeah, I have 11. Yeah, for the most part, yeah, I do. I remember everything. And I'm still in contact with guys who are in prison. Particularly a friend of mine who I think like on a major level, kind of changed who I was. Mainly because he taught me that I didn't have to walk around with a shank anymore. I didn't have to be constantly thinking in my terms of like person who had this gangster mentality. I didn't have to be that type of person in the yard. Um, yeah, so I'm still in contact with him, and one of the things that we actually started to do is yoga. Weirdly enough, was yoga. So you can imagine like these two guys, this in nice shape, doing yoga in the yard. Wow, what's going on there? So they thought we were really weird. And but yeah, I definitely remember. Also like I wrote love letters too.
Oh.
I didn't get them back though. But yeah, definitely. I think it was an interesting experience. One of the first events I've ever did was at NYU's Silver School for Social Work, and one of the guys who was running the event was incarcerated. He had did I think 9 years in the same penitentiary as I did. And when it was all said and done, we had our event, and he earned his doctorates, and he's a professor at NYU. And not only does that provide an example for me, but I think one of the most touching things that happened is that when we all got in a circle and we started talking, he was like, "Yeah, man, I remember when I got to Sack, and I was like, holy shit, I went there too." I was like, "That was crazy." I said, "Yes." So I was like, "Did you always cry when you went into the yard?" He was like, "Nah, not that." But he was like, just to have that moment or that feeling and building that camaraderie and knowing that you have those shared experience with individuals is, it's very touching.
Right. I actually wonder how does like the normal day in your prison look like?
Okay.
I need to have a picture.
So the facilities range. So I've been to quite a few of them. Wow. So initially, Rikers Island, been to a few different buildings on Rikers Island. After that, I transferred upstate. From there, I've been to Sing Sing. From Sing Sing, they transferred me to Comstock. From Comstock, they transferred me to Caxsackie. I only spent 10 days there. I went from Caxsackie to Clinton Annex. From Clinton Annex, I went to Fishkill, SHU, Box. From the Box, I went to Auburn. And I think at Auburn is where I said, I met my friend, I got involved in college, and I started like to change who I was. And that was like probably the longest time I spent in any facility. It was 3 years. And then from there, I went to another facility. So to answer your question, the maximum facilities, it's pretty much a cell. The cell, depending on how big it is, might be wow, much bigger than what you're used to having. But
Oh, sorry.
no problem. Be like,
Oh, my dream.
yes, this is sweet. So literally, and you have your bed, you have your toilet. You have to lock in. So depending on what will be going on, it's like early in the morning, if there'll be an officer coming by with the roll call, and what he'll do, he won't say anything. He'll just walk by with a little list, and you have to be on your cell gate, and you have to tell him child yard, child program. Nothing. If you miss that, you don't leave your cell. And depending if you had to be at a certain place, they lock you up. They write the ticket. So the cells are like very dirty. You think about rats, mice, roaches, bird shit everywhere, and especially when it gets warm, that bird shit, it gets hot, and then you see like fumes from the bird shit, and you inhale that. That's sick. That's get very sick. Yeah, it could depending on where you go. I remember literally one day I had gotten in a fist fight and over me thinking that the guy was trying to rape me, and you know we got it on, and they sent me to the box. And one day it was around the time like child something like that, and I went to put on the light and I literally saw two cockroaches as air mating, and like the whole cell was infested. It's just, and you would think that in a place like America, we do prison exception and filth in prison. But yeah, that's some of the stuff we could definitely.
Actually, Sinai prison was the most clean place in the earth. Cleaner than my house. Yeah, everything is very clean, but you should clean every hour. They torture people around, like it can be any hour, and we get a lot of blood everywhere. And we should make everything beautiful again after the torture hours. Some people should survive
How was
to
the
clean.
how was the food situation?
We had quite difficult with food. It was like that. At the door, people sitting in that. We had a big room, but we get only 2 meters of this room. Other places for the guard. So we have the door, and you have the boss is a prisoner of us who wanna be killed the day after when the food come. You have the door. So you open the guards, 5, 6 like guards open the door around like this only, so you can't go out with this. And the food is there. You should take the food and come in. You take out your hands, and that the food never come in because the plate is too big, so you can't get in. So they torture you until you die, and they say to some other 2 guys to come take this dead body with the food in. And as we used to do, we put that dead body as a table and the food over, and we share the food. You don't have any feeling for that body. He died. He died. You can't be nice and you will survive, and you don't have a place. You can't just. We need to invest in of this. You can't just have this body, and we don't have a place, so we should put him in a way that could help us. We need to survive, so put the food on this person and share the food. Sharing the food was a good experience because you got like half a bread or half a potato, and you should share it. And we don't have laser share it, and we don't absolutely don't have a knife or anything. So you should have justing in some way when you like sometimes like a potatoes for 10 people, and it's quite difficult to share this. And how we try to have justing. Lawyers was very smart, so we used to share all the food like small piece for everyone, like a squad, 35 in the room, 35 pieces of potatoes, and the person who had the potatoes in the hand don't see any one of the prisoners, and the lawyer is next to him and say, take this, and it's the guard say, this food is to, and this person should say a name, Omar. So this person give the food for this person, give a food for someone who don't know, so you just give a food. So you can't choose your own food, which means that no one gonna show them the food that looks very big because you're starving like 20. The biggest dream I said was to eat or then die. So one time you get much food, then the only time so people eat and try to kill themselves, try to just kill themselves because it's quite difficult and you can't eat. The last 10 months and say now all the day the food was mixed with blood and your hair, and you can't eat it without blood because it was one of the rules. If there is no blood in your food, don't eat it. The God torture you. So it's different.
Questions, feel free to step up to the microphone. If you could also, when you step to the mic and introduce yourself, if you could I'm sorry, if you could also introduce yourself briefly before asking your question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm a grad student here. Thank you so much for sharing both your stories. I think I've learned so much, and um, it's changed my perspective on a lot of things. Um, I've been thinking about kind of the term political prisoner and how maybe before I came here tonight, I thought maybe there's like a prisoner, or we're gonna hear stories from someone who was formerly incarcerated and someone who used to be a political prisoner. But now I'm kind of thinking more. I was wondering, Jose, if you relate to the term political prisoner at all, and if you kind of see prison, or like maybe all people who have been incarcerated are in a sense political prisoners. And I was just curious if you relate to that term at all, um, and Omar, yeah, if there's anything you want to share about political prisoner versus kind of that other. Thank you.
Welcome. Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please.
So my name is Nadia Ali, and I just joined Brown here from SOAS. So, I mean, clearly, I mean, I personally felt very inspired listening to you. I mean, I expected to hear more, stories of misery, and what you both did is clearly sort of challenge the idea of what it means to be incarcerated, and in some ways showing us that you were able to turn things around for you yourself, both in terms of looking back, but also looking forward. And while I felt very inspired, and obviously one is always relieved or one can laugh, I also felt a bit uncomfortable. I'm sure many people felt that because, yeah, I mean, clearly, especially Omar, what you speaking about is very horrible as well, and I mean, torture but also I felt uncomfortable because I know that, of course, not everyone is able to turn things around. I mean, I'm less familiar with the situation in the US. I mean, but being half Iraqi and knowing a lot about the Middle East, I mean, I know that many, many people in Syrian prisons, as in many other prisons in the Middle East, don't survive. And even if they survive, are traumatized for life and are not able to turn things around. So I'm sort of, wondering, so how do we engage in this narrative without silencing or in some ways maybe even romanticizing the prison experience? And, going back to the context, why is it that you were in prison and so many thousands of people? And why were you in prison? And here again, I guess linking to the previous question, I mean, I know that in the context of the Middle East, in so many situations, if you were not in prison, somewhere you're missing some honor. I mean, all my friends who were in opposition in Iraq, or now my Kurdish friends, or, many of my friends in Egypt have been in prison at one point in their life, and it's part of being a political activist, a dissident. And in some ways, you're looked at suspiciously if you haven't been, because it means that you haven't resisted, right? Which is very different from being in the US and being in prison. So I was wondering if you can reflect, both of you, a little bit on this question of stigma and honor and how that plays out very differently. And then finally, because I'm a feminist scholar and I used to be professor of gender studies, I mean, your narrative is also, it's a very gendered narrative. I mean, I know you're not women, but, female prisoners would have different experiences as well. And I was just wondering if you could sort of hypothetically speak to that bit. Thank you.
You want to start?
Yeah.
Or I drive?
Now I'll start. So just to answer your first question about the gender experience, and you're right. It's like deeply. Well, my experience is like really deeply embodied in who I am as a person. Like, yeah, I'm a man. And when I speak to other women who have been incarcerated, and one of the biggest things that they do fear is other men. And the violation is different in the sense of, like, perfect example is like Asada Shakur, when she wrote about how when it was written about her, how they would search her and they would enter inside her. And this is a complete violation. And Does this happen to men? Yes, it does. But it became easier to happen to black women because it's as if no one cared about these women. But that's one thing that they had to deal with: the presence of men, the culture of misogyny. This is still very much pervasive in society. But I think it's like intensified when they're in prison. The power dynamic completely shifts. Completely shifts. It's not that it's the way it is now. It just becomes worse. But that's all that I know. I could connect with people who could definitely speak directly to that. A colleague of mine, Michelle Jones, is one, and there are many other women who speak. But also thinking about like what you were saying about the stigma, um, and the reason why I was incarcerated. So I was in a gang, and very common narrative in the sense of we're doing gang banging things. Completely random event. Got in a big fight. One thing led to another. I killed. Um, I came to terms. But that's what happened. But there's also this narrative of like gang culture, gangs- and for me, it's like being released. You have a choice whether to like further embed yourself in that lifestyle or fully remove yourself. And for me, it was like that identity, that personality was much of who I was, down to the point where I think about that all the time and how to keep myself out. And so that's my own struggle there. And the stigma there is that for individuals who are living that lifestyle, you have to kind of like walk the walk, talk the talk, on like what Omar or like what you were saying with Omar's case, where is the resistance? And it's not to valorize like that form of culture. It's just to speak of the logics within. So there definitely is a race and a stigma, but the difference is that in the case in the U.S. context as compared to Syrian context, incarceration and torture. Well, that's number one. I wouldn't even call it. I'll call like torture, but the experts could better define that. But it's in America. It's mostly race based, and a part of the conversation that I had with that guy in the taxi earlier, and this is a white guy. Um, he was really fearful of his 13-year-old son getting life in prison just for making a stupid mistake. So it's really understanding as a youth in America of color that, it could happen. It could literally be the wrong place in the wrong time, mistake identity. There are many examples that show this, but the carceral system is just this long, long thread of how race relations in America. And it's like you said, not to romanticize prison, but back to like to link that thread about the idea of a political prisoner. No, I would not consider myself a political prisoner. I didn't do anything political. And that would kind of be like a disgrace to guys who I know who are part of the Black Panther movement, who I know were incarcerated, who I sat down with, who died in prison because they were fighting for their own struggle. So that would be a disrespect to them for me to call myself. I was just a dumb kid doing dumb things. And
I should answer first. The more you are in prison in Syria, the more hero you are. So have you been there in 3 years, you are a hero. 5 years, a bigger hero. So it's like a big honor to be a prisoner in Syria. It's not like other countries because, as they mentioned before, the police is the bad guys and the prisoners the good guys. It's how many of the Syrian people think, like the revolution people. I was arrested the last time I was arrested with my 3 cousins, Bashir, Rashad, and Noor. Noor, a girl. And it was an absolutely very hard experience to have her with us. Hard for me and extremely hard for her. But the first time when they arrested us, it was like the revolution is still new in Syria, so they don't use to torture girls so much as I could see later after some month. So for us, in that first days of like 6 days of torture, we don't want to answer any question, because the question is, how many officers have you killed? We never killed anyone, but you should answer. So I don't answer. I don't say anything, just silent. But I was forced after that they mentioned my cousin. If you don't talk, your cousin is here. It was big problem, and we should protect her in any way. So we was forced to talk, to say that I killed an officer, then tortured me more. So I said I killed 2, 3, 5, 10. Then for her, the first month was like not so much torture, but still a lot if you compare it with other like situations. Then when they put me in branch 215, there I could see how they torture women for the first time. And it was absolutely very hard, especially for our culture. It's a lot about, you can like say any bad words about my father, my brother, but you can't mention my mother or my sister. You can't use these words, good or bad. You don't talk about this. So you should be, it's like safe thing you don't talk about. So it was extremely difficult to have our cousin there. And we knew that she died in prison after 5 months. His brothers died. I just heard that she died because women wasn't like in their own floor, the sex floor. And we knew that the gods was doing very bad thing with them, and many of them like get children in prison, was pregnant because of the god, and get children, and the child became like 1 year, 2 years, and the child never seen any sun or like tree, nothing. The son only know the god mother, nothing else. The food, me understand. So you can't explain for this child what car means. You don't explain. You can't talk with this child about what fruit means. Never. They only get bread and nothing. So it's extremely difficult. It's more difficult for women than men. Yeah, the gods know how important is it to arrest women so they can talk with revolutions. People, if you do anything, we take your women. It can be a very very hard issue. I don't know if I answered everything or if I understood the question to start with. Yeah.
I teach Arabic at Connecticut College, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much, Jose and Omar. I just would like to say that there is no single story, so it's amazing that we're able to hear your part of the story or your kind of story. And I spoke to Syrian women refugees in a Zaatari camp in Jordan, and I conducted interviews with them in 2015. And they spoke about the children and husbands who were in prison and the torture, and how passionate they were about having their children turn into men, and how torture and prison made them into the men they are today. And I would like to say to you that these women were in pain because they couldn't see their children, and they had to leave Syria and to leave their houses and jobs and life and just come to Jordan as refugees, and nobody wants to be a refugee. They gave up their life so they can have, some better life for those children who survived. But behind, they left, their men and their families and everybody. But what mattered most to everybody is they do not want to live in dhul. Mudaffar Nawab, when he said, سبحانك كل الأشياء رضيت سوى الذل وأن يوضع قلبي في قفص في بيت السلطان لكن سبحانك كل الطيور لها أوطان إلا أنا ما زلت أطير. So to mention something about torture in prisons, every person in the Arab world is in prison. Everybody's tortured. You wake up every morning and your dad couldn't say I love you. He loves you so much. But what world do we live in? If you wake up every morning and you're a man and you cannot do what you want, you cannot say what you want, death is better, right? So at least they died in dignity, they died for the revolution, and you're here to tell the story. So you survived so somebody can, learn about it. So women are proud of you. I didn't speak to men. I spoke only to women because my book is in women in Jordan. But I really wish to be able to hear to somebody to hear somebody's point of view as a man, because the way women talked about it was very passionate and they were in tears. And they always ended the conversation saying, you know what? My son died raising his head up and dignity and for revolution and for Syria. And if you don't die, who are we? Men or women? So good for you guys. And welcome to America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Survivor of Syrian facilities. And here's my first point. I intentionally called it facility. We have to put the things in a political perspective. We have civil prisons in Syria, like Adra, for example,
Yep.
where when we talk about Adra prison, it's like what Jose is describing. But these are not prisons. One of the Holocaust researchers called Michael Isakov saw the photos of Caesar. I don't know if people are familiar with about around 50,000 photos
55.
of dead bodies in Syrian facilities. Isakov said, and he is very respected researcher in his field, the first thing I remembered when I saw these photos is the concentration camps. We are talking about more than 200,000 people, bodies, died under torture. So I'm sorry, Alex, but I don't find any good way to compromise these two talks. With all due respect, we are speaking about, when we are speaking about Syrian prisons, we are speaking about a Holocaust happening in the 21st century under the eyes of all free world. It's very wrong when we call this prisons. It normalizes this. These are not prisons. These are concentration camps. I will share a very small story. Before I share the story, I will just tell you about these photos, 50,000 photos of dead bodies. They are bones. Omar knows what I'm talking about.
I wrote the numbers of the dead bodies.
Yep. They are bones and with skin full of scabies, full of holes, literal holes. I would prefer if Omar brought his photos before and how he looked after he get out of the prison.
I can talk about that.
Yeah,
Exactly after.
I would love later. The only difference between these bodies alive and these bodies dead are that guys, their heart stopped. So we were dead men not walking, dead men sitting in this 40 centimeter space. When I get out of the prison, my dad barely could recognize me. He started to cry. And the doctor was like, if you want to cry, cry from happiness. At least you got the chance to say goodbye to your son, because I couldn't assure you he will live. Fortunately, I lived. It's not fair to put these two things together. That's my point. And my point is to tell you guys, like Omar was trying to tell you, there is a Holocaust happening in the 21st century under our eyes, and it's still going on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And at the first, I don't want to compare, well, not here to compare like my prison experience with, let's say, prison experience. There's no, we can't compare this. It's quite very different stories, but maybe we can compare the psychological thing of being there in prison sometimes. But if I mention, because it's very important maybe to mention Caesar pictures, 55,000 pictures of dead bodies, because there is something happened in the American politics talking about these pictures right now, Caesar law and this thing. It was an soldier officer taking pictures of the dead bodies to send the pictures to the court. The court tell the family that the, yeah, exactly, and the system should be, he should take the picture to the court, and the court should tell the family that their their children in prison have been killed or died, not been killed. But this guy save a copy of the pictures and take this picture, and he is in other countries right now and could show these pictures to the world. And I absolutely know these pictures, and because I wrote the numbers on my cousins when they died, I wrote the numbers of more than, in only branch 215, I wrote the numbers of more than 8,000 dead bodies. So it's extremely important to know that it's more than Holocaust, because the difference between the Holocaust in or maybe concentration camps in Poland or Auschwitz, it's very similar, but the extra thing we have in Syria is using the technology to torture people more than what they used in before. So you can I don't talk about the details because you should Google it. You should see it. I can't explain describe what happens in prison. There's you start with losing your nails. You only start. After 2 years of torture, you just understand taking your nails was the easiest thing you experience in prison. It's nothing. It's funny if you compare it with when they hung you to the ceiling, when you lost your shoulders, and when they force you to kill other prisoners, and when a child is forced to kill his father, and the father is used to forced to kill his child. It's extremely hard situation, and you should read about that, because we had it was over the table peace in Syria. We didn't know the war just suddenly started, and people start to get killed and to be arrested. So you don't know. Maybe it happens here tomorrow, over tomorrow. You don't know. So it's great that you know what happens in the world. We try to stop it, because if we don't stop this sickness is coming to everyone. We should do something. Yeah, and I think that's enough.
I'm just
Sorry
no,
for...
please, no apology necessary. And Mahmoud, thank you for your comments. And I think the goal here, I think, certainly is not to compare for the purpose of equation, and certainly kind of these experiences are not necessarily equatable. But I do think that there is perhaps a purpose here in thinking about how to conceive of kind of transnational networks of solidarity. And I'm going to use that to kind of ask Jose and Omar if they could speak about kind of this question of solidarity. Jose, you spoke about it in your remarks, but what effective solidarity or meaningful solidarity would look like, and whether there's a potential for thinking about kind of networks or movements of solidarity that aren't kind of limited by national borders, and maybe can draw connections across those borders.
Yeah. Also to touch on what you also said, Mahmoud, too, because I really appreciate your comments and the what happens between the both. They're not complements, and what Omar is saying is like, what is the psychology? What is the logic of coming out of prison? What traumas do you carry with you? Also, you think about it like, how did the prison system today amount to what it is today, where millions of people are incarcerated, and it's like it's nothing. So you can't really compare struggles as to see that how power regimes actually are operating on the civilians, the people. And I think like if we start to like look at this place like America, what am I? I'm a Puerto Rican. I'm a mix of people, right? My race does not exist anymore. So like there's a longer and different history there that what happened, my Holocaust happened hundreds of years ago. And so it's like to talk about how these things are linked, how power fluctuates, and yes, solidarity. But I think, like to answer your question, like solidarity, I don't think solidarity is enough because solidarity can be done on Facebook, Instagram. You have to find people who are accomplices, someone who has a shared investment in the struggle. And I think a lot of people are still searching for that. One of the things that I think people could begin to do is that where we're having conversations like this, that they be more inclusive, that they be held in places that are not Brown University. Rather go to the hood. I was on Westminster. There's a lot of people there who are touched by the carceral system, touched by the social welfare system. We won't even give them quarters. These are some of the logics that we're keeping. So how do we break barriers? Still looking at other humans with disgust. And this is some of the logics that we have to think about in the classroom, but what are we embodying every day with our politics, unknowingly? Some of the ways that accomplice, the beginning to become accomplice, shifts or changes, because you start to change other people. But more concretely, is that there are plenty of organizations out there. I'm part of NYU Prison Education Program, where it provides education to people who are incarcerated. And when they get out of prison, now we're able to say, hey, we got 9 guys enrolled. These are just one of many organizations that you will have to begin to look how you can actually help put yourself on the same playing field. Look less.
I think it's very important that we talk about this experience. It's important for everyone to understand that you can, like, maybe say something not related right now, but I think it's very important for people to understand that being prisoners doesn't mean that you are a bad guy a whole time. It could be, but when you get out of prison, you can be like a very normal person. And in our system right now, not in my case because I'm a political prisoner, but in other case, when you come out of prison after a crime or something, you can be like insulated in your society. You can't meet anyone. You can't get a job, and it's a big problem. I met a very great guy in Sweden a month ago, and this guy had a company to come to prisons and teach the coding for prisoners to be IT engineers in prison. And some of the crimes is you have in prison because you killed someone or you stole money for something, and these crimes could be because of money, and you get IT is the high paid work after prison. I think it's a great idea to have in every single prison, because in our University of Whispers, we couldn't learn so much. Everything we learned was very practice. So we could use it directly. We could do something with that. So we should support prisoners, not enslave them in somewhere in our society. It's the most wrong thing we can do, because they're still alive. They exist. They are everywhere. We should have them in our society, not outside. Outside, that means they are gonna be more like they're gonna do something bad, because if you are outside, no one care about you, living on north of Sweden, for example, when like only 2 meters snow there. What you gonna do? You just have bad ideas. You hate the country, you hate the people, and when you hate everything, you can't do anything good. You do everything bad. And then society say, you are a bad guy. Yeah, take care of me, I will be a good guy. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Question over here.
Hi, my name is Laila. I'm an undergrad student. And thank you so much, both of you. I learned so much, and it was really incredible to hear you talk. My first question is for both of you, and that's when you've both witnessed so much, the capacity for human evil and torture and cruelty. How do you yourselves begin to understand human nature, and why do you think that people have this capacity to do evil unto other people? And then specifically for Omar, I have two questions. How did you end up going to Turkey? And the second question.
Yeah, you do.
And the second
Sorry.
question. And the second question.
Yeah.
How do you, in Sweden specifically, I know there's a lot of political turmoil going on about refugees and political prisoners. How do you think would be the best way to educate Swedes about the need to have rehabilitation for Syrian refugees and to help Syrian refugees assimilate into Swedish culture?
Okay, the first question about, if I give it in a different way, how could the guards torture us when they are like normal humans? I remember one day an officer came with a soldier and ordered the soldier to hit him with 100 belts. And this soldier was new in this prison. So you say, what? Hit him. If you don't hit him, I'm gonna hit you. So he started to hit me and like counting when you come 29, 31, like miss some numbers. So he hit me like less than 100 bells. The day after, the same guard hitting me like +1 more than yesterday. And after 2 weeks, this soldier without the officer hitting me like 200-300. You lose this feeling of like humanity. Everyone, even the prisoners, when we call ourselves that the good guys, some of us kill each other to eat food. When you are in danger, you are a different person. Absolutely different. You think in a different way. You can't kill anyone. Some people is very strong and they say, no, I don't kill anyone, even if I die. But it's not easy decision to say that. We could see some people, especially when you see some examples when someone said to the guard, no, I don't kill my brother, and the guard come in and kill this person in a horrible way, and you get scared. You can't. Yes. How do I do when they do ask me tomorrow? Quite difficult. The same thing for the soldiers. Some of them like to do that because they hate us, and some of them is forced to do that. Then they start to love doing that, have some fun. They took some prisoners to be like voluntaries and torture us. So my best friend was torturing me. My cousin was forced to torture me. And these people who became voluntaries start to just don't feel anything. They torture us. Yeah. My best friend was torturing me, like extra bells. I can't just turn and say, what are you doing? I can't do that. It's unfortunately it's normal. People, a human can be not a human, very not a human. About how I ended up in Turkey, they didn't shoot me actually. They just tried to make the pain theater to show me that if you talk about this, I'm gonna kill you. So I'm the winner of that because they tried to just scare me. So I never talk about this experience. They shoot next to me, not on me. So I was still alive. Snipers everywhere. There was no no building, so there was no snipers, but I could see that because I was waiting to die, so I could see everything, like snipers everywhere. I'm gonna die. I ended up in Turkey, we still see snipers everywhere because I can't think that I'm gonna survive. How I ended up in Turkey when they just leave me there outside of Sinai prison. The good thing in our country that the bus stop when they see you, not in the bus station, which amazing. I was in the street, the bus comes, stop. Yeah, get in. I sit in the on the bus, and next soldier going home, and the soldier is looking at me like, because I was very skinny. I was 34 kilograms, blood in my eyes. I had no hair, not here either. I, I never seen myself in 3 years. So when I saw myself for the first time in the mirror, it was incredible. It was horrible. I just came to the mirror, and it was a guy took me from the Damascus Centrum. I don't know who is this person. Took me to the hotel, and I come to the mirror for the first time. And it was someone. I look back. I was handsome before prison.
You still
Very, very handsome. So I look at me. It's absolutely not the face that I can meet anyone with. Can you imagine when my mother gonna get this picture? This man was a lawyer, paid $15,000, an officer, to take me outside of prison, and my mother said, I gave you the money when I see a picture, and I Skyped with my son. And when this man took a picture of me and said to send it to my mother on WhatsApp, my mother answered with a voice, said, you try to be smart to sell some bones to me for $15,000? It's not my son. I don't want this. And this man gets very angry, and they can't do anything. My mom don't believe that it's me, don't want to take me, and this man don't need me. He want money. It was big problematic. Then he sent me to Turkey, and there I met my mother, and I could not recognize my mother, not she either. So I ended up in an isolation room in Turkey because I had to be seen. The police took me and the ambulance, and after that I start to die actually. Then we decided to travel to Sweden by taking the boat, the trip from the Mediterranean Sea with my 10 years old brother, Oli. Then we traveled to Sweden. The first country who gave me medical help and treatment was Sweden. And unfortunately, not other countries. Austria, but they sent me to Germany. German, the first word was, take off your clothes. I was naked in 3 years in prison. I'm not going to have this feeling again. I say, okay, you should get out. So I get out, sleep on the street 2 days, then come to Copenhagen, then to Sweden. So I ended up in Sweden. The third thing about Swedish, how to educate people, I'm trying to have, first I like to talk, and I invest in that, telling people, have many speech or talks in Sweden, and not only Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, to talk with people that we can be amazing people as you are. We can't do much, but try to help us. The best thing I got when I came to Sweden was meeting the guy in the hospital. This person was everything for me because I met his mother, his father, and brothers, and we got a network, friends, family, and start to meet the whole Swedish society and try to talk. The problem is some refugees. It's a bad word to say refugees. It's a bad feeling, Swedish people, when they say refugees are boring you. I hate this feeling. I am strong. I am very strong. Don't look down at me. What I have gone through, you never can survive. So I'm very strong. We hate this feeling that people looking down at you, or boring you, or you should need. No, we don't need so much. We need social help to meet people, to be able to talk, to speak Swedish when we are in Sweden. Because the problem is people are not so excited to learn Swedish, and they don't speak English. And it's very, very very important that you learn the language, that because you don't get friend, if you don't have friends, you are depressed, and you can't do anything in Sweden. So Swedish people is very nice people, but the problem is they think too much before they talk to you. Oh, if I ask him, where are you from? Maybe he think I'm racist. If I say to him, come, how are you? Maybe he say maybe he is homophile. There is a lot. They think too much. So when you sit in the bus in Syria, you sit to the next to a person in the bus. But in Sweden, person. No one is sitting like next to the other person. People don't talk. There's a big problem. And quite big different from Syria. We just talk with anyone, say Assalamu alaikum for anyone. In Sweden, especially in Stockholm. That's right. Yeah, it's a quite difficult for us. But I tried. We should jump over the wall and try to explain this, because Swedish people, or like all the people, is good, but they need to understand more than we can find a solution together. Refugees can't find solution themselves. We need communication. Sorry for a long answer.
Oh, thank you so much.
To think about what you were speaking about, the capacity for the evil. That's like a really, really big question. I think you have to think about it in terms as if, does evil actually like exist? I think there's good action and there's bad action, and people don't necessarily view themselves in those terms. And I think the capacity to do all the harm to a person is really deeply based in how the prisoner or the political prisoner viewed as less than that person who is guarding them or has power over them. And when you're able to wash like a sense of yourself or a sense of that part of yourself there, like away, that you're able to do certain things, like not feed a crack a person's cell open at night and choke, leave them dead in the cell. You know, there's a lot of things that happen, especially violences. So you ask yourself, like, how do we continue to do that? And in my case, the violence continues beyond freedom. Number one, it's psychological. Number two, it's still very much threatening my freedom. I have parole. Me being here at this moment, it's a parole violation, even though it's an educational moment. The people who have power over me do not see it as that. They only view it in terms of what they have to do. And they don't view themselves as being evil as compared to doing their job. So we have to begin to question, why do we have jobs that cause harm? How do we mitigate?
I think we have time for just one last question. Over here.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I work with refugees, have for over 20 years. I want to thank both of you for coming and sharing your stories, but more importantly, bearing witness to what you've been through and making that available to people who don't have information or perspective on that context. It's extremely important. And Omar, you said at the beginning you were not a lecturer, but I would remind you of the strong storytelling tradition of the Syrian people and maybe embrace it that way, although with a little bit more fact than fantasy, but you can do whatever you want. I do want to address, I did spend a number of months, almost a year, more than that, in Syria, working with refugees there, and saw a lot of people arrested for various reasons, especially people who were seeking asylum. So I have some familiarity with those stories. The prison. Comment on the insidiousness of the regime and how it pulls in people who were, like yourself, really an innocent bystander who was not a necessary, a political activist in the traditional sense. You were there observing and were caught up. This happens to people who are also seeking protection, as you well know. And it's very different from the American context as it was, although that's changing in our country these days, which is sad. But this issue of injustice and not having access to fair hearing or transparency or even basic human rights in that situation. So I'm very happy that you survived and that you're here to tell your tale. And then addressing Jose's point about taking the stories out of the university settings and out of the more privileged settings and bringing them to the streets, whether it's Westminster Street or in the Bronx or in other places, very important, because the power elites, whether they're here in America or in Syria or anywhere in the Arab world or anywhere else around the world, are the ones who are making the policies that affect the people who are then being disproportionately impacted by these policies. And until we get more people out there telling their tales and saying these are the repercussions of these policies, I don't think we have any hope as a society to change them. And we're on a very slippery slope now. So less of a question and more of a punt. I apologize for that, but I was very moved. I think, Omar, you probably saw me sitting in the front row crying because it was very familiar. And I'm just happy that you were both here and doing what you do. So thank you for bringing that to us.
I think that's a good place to bring it to a close, and just to thank both of you, unless you have any last remarks.
Like us on Facebook.
That's the perfect way to close.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.